Again, Admin Law 101, the minister makes the decision. The minister is required to apply his mind. And there is no evidence that he did. The question of the plan made pursuant to the decision and the orderly conduct of how the process of the Zimbabweans returning to Zimbabwe just doesn't arise, because there's no evidence that the minister applied his mind to the antecedent decision.
All right, now let's discuss this further. We're now joined via Zoom by Dr Vusumuzi Sibanda, the president of the African Diaspora Global Network. Thank you so much for your time, Dr Sibanda. When you look at this particular matter that is currently unfolding in front of us in court, in as far as the ZEP is concerned, it does speak of more fundamental issues on immigration in this country. Just unpack to us what we are currently seeing and how South Africa has handled this particular matter.
Well, look, if we look at the situation in South Africa, for starters, we have got a lot of people that are undocumented. And now, when you look at the undocumented people and then you look at the 178,000 people that were documented and have lived in the country for a very long period of time, and in terms of, basic human rights as enshrined in our Bill of Rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it is very clear that they have stayed for an elongated period of time, which entitles them at least to some form of residence that would be at least permanent on the basis of long stay, because that is what normally people get permanent residence based on. So when we look at what is currently obtaining, we are seeing a situation where, one, the politics that are playing are actually trying to disenfranchise people that have become at home in terms of the law and exacerbate the situation of undocumented migrants in the country. And obviously the minister is obviously using resources that should have been channeled in ensuring that people are properly documented, and then trying by all means to get people undocumented and exacerbate again the problems of undocumentation.
And now when you look at, just some of the utterances that have been made by the minister, whether it is within his court papers or just on the sidelines of this court matter, he does insist that this will be setting a dangerous precedent if what the court needs is in fact granted, saying that he took into consideration all the interests and rights implicated in this matter. Do you think he's applied his mind?
The minister has not. I must categorically say so. And clearly, if you followed for example, the argument that was made by Advocate Gauteng, where he looked at the principle of legality and review on the basis that, the decision that was taken, for example, the minister had not applied his mind, and the reason for the decision, because the minister should, in terms of the Immigration Act, for good reason, give the exemption permits, and for good cause, he may withdraw. Now, the withdrawal of those particular, permits or the non-extension should be based on the fact that there is good reason. And the good reasons are basically saying that the reasons why the issuance of those particular permits had been done, it means that they had come to an end. And the minister had argued that the situation in Zimbabwe had, substantially changed, and he could not prove that, when they went before court. So obviously, it shows that the minister had not applied his mind. And furthermore, the minister had gone on to say that, the situation, the job situation in South Africa, which is what he continues, to indicate that unemployment levels are very high in the country. But that was never the reason why, the permits were issued. It was never the fact that, there was, high either employment levels or problems with unemployment or otherwise in the country. Those were mutually exclusive. And for that particular reason, for the minister to now come and aver that, this is going to set a very wrong precedent, he is actually misleading the public, because he is trying to imply that that is a policy decision which the judiciary has no place in adjudicating over, which is not true, because clearly it is not. It is an illegal. It is, in terms of legality, it does not pass. In terms of communicating the decision to the people that are affected in terms of PAJA, the minister failed to do that. And in fact, the only communication that he did was from the 6th of January 2022, which was a post facto, and it was fait accompli because the decision had long been taken and it was not going to change that decision.
Outside of the legal issues, and some of which the court has obviously, in agreement with in terms of what you are currently outlining now, let's look at the humanitarian factors and what is at stake here. We are talking about of about 180,000 Zimbabweans whose futures are at this present moment uncertain. What can you tell us there in terms of what are the likely prospects in terms of these 100,000 people who, some of which, as you've also said, have been in this country for the better part of most of their lives, in fact. And if you also look at the recent developments in Zimbabwe, some of their prospects don't seem to be any different to what they were, a couple of years ago.
It is precisely the reason why they were issued in the first place, because of the chaotic, political and economic environment that was obtained in Zimbabwe in about 2000, from 2000 up to when they were issued in 2009. And unfortunately, as it comes at the moment, we have seen, the report that comes from SADC, from the Qatar, observer mission, and even the AU, that indeed there are quite some serious concerns that have been raised, which were the reasons why there was such, unrest in Zimbabwe at that particular period in time. And therefore, to then assume and think that, what the minister had gone on to say that the situation in Zimbabwe had improved, what has actually happened, it is actually, a spit on the face of the minister, but the minister lied blatantly, to the South Africans and misled them to say the situation in Zimbabwe has actually improved, especially on the face of the 2018 elections where people were killed, live ammunition was used by the government. And we heard the government of Zimbabwe when, the ZEP withdrawal was announced, when they, intimated that they were going to help people that wanted to go back to Zimbabwe. To date, the government of Zimbabwe has not been able to do that. Even the few that tried, to retain and wanted assistance with just crossing the border, with the items that they had, acquired in South Africa, because they feared the unknown before the court case. And unfortunately, the government could not even assist, or lift a finger to assist. So you're looking at a situation where these people would need to have, land, they need to have jobs, they need to be able to, like you rightly say, people have been here, for some of them for more than 2 decades, and some of them are children that were born here. Now, to say they should then be lifted and go to a country that has no respect for human rights, and that would be asking the impossible.
Where do we place Zimbabwe in all of this? At some point, some people have also been calling out, in fact, some groupings within Zimbabwe that are, just basically activists in that country for change, given the humanitarian crisis that also exists in Zimbabwe. Where does that place the onus of the country in terms of responsibility and accountability? Of course, notwithstanding the narrative that we are seeing in this country as well in terms of, how immigrants are looked at. But surely at some point the conversation also needs to include that country.
Well, look, Zimbabwe is actually the center of all this chaos, because the reason why we've got such an influx, over and above the 178,000, people that are in South Africa, we look at other people that are not part of the ZEP, regime, and you're looking at those that have got ordinary, critical skills visas and, other regimes of visas, like your family visas and so forth. So that would make the number, very, very huge. And the reason for that is that Zimbabwe is inhabitable to the people, not only because it has failed economically, but because its politics have completely, crashed and crumbled. And what has basically happened now is, which is very unfortunate, is that during these particular elections, we have seen the president of South Africa going to Zimbabwe to congratulate, Mr. Mnangagwa on his inauguration. And when you engage, the government of the ANC, they've said, well, look, they are hoping, or they are looking at a position maybe if, there is a need to negotiate so that they are not going to blur those bridges. But the issue is there is a SADC Observer Mission report that says those results are not endorsed. And what exactly that means is, if you remember, the tribunal, SADC Tribunal Court, was disbanded in about 2012. Again, it was because of a ruling that was against Zimbabwe on the land issue. And today, we are actually seeing a situation where the SADC might go against one of its important organs, the Troika, and failing to honor this particular mission, which shows that, there is an opportunity to get things right for Zimbabwe and for all the people of Africa, especially looking at the problems that Africa is actually having. Because look, the bulk of these problems are very, very, conspicuous in Africa in terms of poor democratic, principles and election rules. So when we have got PAM and other related, rules that need to be followed. So Zimbabwe is actually central. It is the creator of all these problems because these people have come to South Africa mainly as a result of push factors. And those push factors are failure to observe the rule of law, constitutionalism, and, for example, freedom of speech in terms of the constitution, freedom of expression. We currently have a new bill, a new act in terms of what we call, the Patriotic Act. So Zimbabwe is actually the main cause of this, and it needs neighboring countries, and particularly South Africa, which is actually one of the major recipients of Zimbabweans, as a result of the problems there, to stand up and be counted in making sure that Zimbabwe is held to account.